Welcome to Voices of the Wild Earth, a podcast series from the Idaho Mythweaver. I'm Jane Fritz. Back in 1991, I produced a 5-part series of documentaries for Spokane Public Radio. Called Keepers of the Earth, the programs featured stories of each of the Idaho tribes, set within the context of their histories, cultures, and interrelationships with the natural world. These many years later, the voices of the storytellers and Indigenous leaders are more relevant than ever. We invite you now to listen and learn from the Native peoples, whose values and perspectives create a future that we all can embrace. As you drive south from Mountain Home or north from Elko, 100 miles in either direction through the vast stretches of high desert plains skirted by the Oahe Mountains, miles of seemingly endless fence lines mark cattle ranches and frame the highway. But fences suddenly disappear as you enter the Duck Valley Indian Reservation, home to the Nua and Numa peoples, the Western Shoshone and Paiute. Duck Valley straddles the states of Idaho and Nevada, and is country that the Shoshone scout Captain Sam negotiated for his people in 1875, saying, "We like this valley very much. We will live and die here." Since that time, the Shoshone Paiute people have cared well for their home. They have been keepers of the earth. The Duck Valley Reservation is unique in that it is wholly owned by the Shoshone Paiute tribes, with the land held in trust by the federal government. In Duck Valley, in open-range territory, there are no fences, and cattle and horses owned by individual tribal members graze in common within reservation boundaries, in different pastures dictated by the seasons, spring, summer, and fall. Tribal councilman, storyteller, and cattle rancher, Arthur Manning.
We have one of the nicest grazing lands anywhere. We have running water year-round and a lot of shade up in the mountains for the cattle. I think with proper management, we can graze many more cattle than that we have now. I think we could probably graze at least 10,000 head here if we managed properly.
There are over 250,000 acres of reservation land, with 20,000 acres cultivated in hay crops, the critical factor determining the size of the livestock herds. Tribal Administrator Herman Atkins.
It's managed efficiently because it isn't overgrazed, and it's not overgrazed because the number of livestock owners is limited by the number of acreage available for crop production. For wintering purposes, you have to grow crops, and if you can't grow crops, you really can't get into the cattle business.
If in the future, however, expansion of the herds does occur, regulations to prevent overgrazing will be initiated, and tribal members already used to working together most likely will adhere to them without incident. Cattle came to the Shoshone Paiutes along with the rest of the white man's world, and it has been a lucrative industry for some. But successful living in a desert on a finite area of land largely depends on water. The Oahe River flows through the reservation and is one of the Creator's most appreciated gifts. Arthur Manning.
Way back when the reservation was first set aside, We have heard stories about the Indians up there netting and spearing salmon that came up to spawn. And when they started putting dams in the Snake River and the Columbia River, why it cut off that supply of fish for us. The stories that we hear the old folks talk about was that in the early spring during the spawning season, the willows would be red with salmon being dried for winter use.
The awahi in its salmon once provided a stable source of food for the Shoshone Paiute people. Tribal planner Lindsay Manning explains.
The Waihi River is at the headwaters of the Columbia River watershed basin. So we're right at the top. Biologists tell us that there's not a species alive that, even if it was physically possible for them to come up here to Duck Valley anymore, that the species has vanished. Only the biggest and the strongest were able to make it up this far. But now, because of the hydro projects and in-stream flows and water impoundments, water temperature quality, that there's no longer a salmon alive that could make it up here, if he could swim over the dams.
In only 2 generations, the Shoshone Paiute people have lost their cultural connection to the salmon. But fishing is still in the blood. Although there are no more migrating fish, there are rainbow trout. And the trout fishery is a substantial economic enterprise. Most of the government and crucial tribal programs are funded through fish permit revenues. Tribal Council Chairman Jim Paiva explains.
We have tremendously good clean water, tremendously good fishing. 2 big reservoirs. At one time, the reservoirs brought in $100,000 a year. Fishermen from Idaho, California, Utah, Nevada, all over. The purpose of the tribal council is to keep the general account above water, find revenue to keep the programs going.
The Shoshone Paiute people defend their water rights and water uses despite challenges and management problems. Lindsay Manning.
The revenues were probably twice what they are now, and the quality and the management of the fisheries dropped real low to where we lost our sports fishermen, where he'd come all the way to Duck Valley and find that there was a poor take or a poor crop, and the word gets around, and pretty soon our revenues dropped substantially, from maybe 100,000 to what it is today, maybe 40,000. Since the tribal government now placed a natural resources director and a person pretty much full-time on the situation, the restocking program is more stable, and we've got hundreds and thousands of pounds of fingerlings coming in and catchables, but it's going to take a while for our reputation to be rebuilt.
Clean air, clean grasses, clean water. While visiting with Duck Valley's friendly residents, I was told about these. But I was also told about potential threats to these resources, like gold mining. I thought hard about the impacts this extractive industry might have on the Indian people and their way of life, and began formulating questions to ask. Instead of the anticipated answers, though, Art Manning told me this story.
Well, I don't know whether this ties in with the economics or the environmental part of the impact that we're faced with, but it's a story that the older people tell their youngsters to keep them from being too friendly with strangers. Once upon a time when animals were people, 2 families were camped in an area where there was water and shade trees, and the 2 mothers would go off in search of wild potatoes and carrots, which was one of the main food for the families at that time. And they'd leave early in the morning and return late in the evening. And one day when they were away all day, the 2 families, one was a bear family and the other one was a deer family. And the bear mother came home alone and told the dear children that their mother decided to stay overnight, that she had found a place where there was plenty of roots to dig so that she would stay overnight and probably wouldn't come home till another day. The following morning, the bear mother went off to dig roots, and the children of the deer family became suspicious because the little bear children were running and playing, and then they would take a piece of fat and put it in their mouth and say, "Oh, how sweet this is." And they said, I think they killed our mother, and just are telling us that she found roots. So that evening, the bear mother came home alone again. And then the next day, when she went off to work, why, the deer children were sure that something had happened to their mother. So they decided to play a trick on the bear children. So they had a game that they called Smoke Out. They would build a fire in a sweat lodge type of hut. And when you hear us telling you that we have had enough smoke, be sure and open the door and let us out. And we'll be the first ones to go in. So the deer children went in. And when the smoke started to bother them in the little hut, they started hollering, open the door, we've had enough. The bear children opened the door, and the little deer children came on out. Now it's your turn. So they put the bear children in this little hut that they were using, and they sealed the cover so that no smoke would escape. And then when the bear children started to holler about having enough smoke, why the deer children wouldn't let them out. And they just waited until everything got quiet. And then when they were sure that they were dead, then they opened the door and brought them out. And then they used the bear mother's rouge or war paint and painted their faces and propped them up against the teepee that they lived in. And then they left. The deer children, it was a girl and a boy. So they ran off into the mountains. In the meantime, the bear mother came home, and she could see her two children standing in front of her teepee. And she started hollering at them. She said, "You're wasting my rouge." And she was angry with them. As she came up to where they were, why she shoved them, and they, of course, were dead, and they both fell. Then she started looking for the deer children. And the deer children came to a river. And they were wondering how they would cross that. And while they were looking for a place to cross, well, they found the crane sitting there. And they said, "Uncle, we're in trouble. We did away with the bear children because we were sure that she killed our mother. And we're trying to run away. Would you help us cross this river?" So the crane stretched his long leg across the river, and the two deer children ran across. And just as they got across, well, the crane told them that you have to be alert. I'll make sure that your hearing is good, and then you also be able to smell. Your sense of scent will be good. Always be on the alert for the enemy. That's one way that you'll survive. So the deer children went on into the mountains. Then the bear mother finally, following their tracks, found their trail and followed them to where the crane was sitting. And the crane, she gave him the story that she was very anxious to get across this river. So the crane put his leg across the river, and she started to cross. And just as she got to the knee joint, why, she got thirsty. So she took out her willow cup and reached down and got some water and drank the water. And when she got through, she started to shake the excess water out of the cup on his knee. And the crane drew his leg back, and the bear fell into the river and drowned.
Perhaps the values learned through the traditional stories will help guide tribal leaders in deciding about mineral development on the reservation. Cultural anthropologist Rodney Fry explains.
Power of the story for the traditional Indian. They're alive with the story. I don't want to oversimplify this, but those folks that have the story are the ones that can mediate the modern contradictions that we all deal with, the issues of right and wrong, which path to take. The story gives people a criteria to make those sorts of judgments. It gives them the strength to make decisions in the first place and lays out much of the territory.
Lindsay Manning reflects on the importance of stories such as the one told by his uncle.
Because each one contains a lesson or a moral, you're able to see the lesson played out in a story. It talks about animals speaking and animals being on the same level as the people. You know, the same level. They spoke, they exchanged. See, right now, as soon as we're born, we're told not to believe anything we can't see. We're told they're all fairy tales. You know, I believe at one time everybody did speak the same language back when the earth was innocent and pure. When we say all our relations, when we end our prayers, we see all our relations because we're claiming everything as our relative. We're not above them and we're not below them. We're with them. You know, we're in the same sphere, same universe.
That same equality and connectedness extends to mountains and rivers. The prospect of opening the reservation to oil drilling or mineral exploration is a potential threat to the land and the Shoshone Paiute culture. Decisions whether or not to mine or drill rests on the shoulders of tribal leaders. Winona Charles is the first woman to serve on the Shoshone Paiute Tribal Council.
I look at mining as the destroying of our land and robbing our mountains of what it has in it now. There's a lot of people that would probably protest against mining because we're looking at our sacred grounds a lot of times. Because everything that is here is very sacred to me and my family. I think to me it is a great creation. You look at everything. I look at everything. I look at the plants. I look at things growing up from the earth, the Mother Earth itself, the water that helps the plants grow. And in some places there's hardly any water, and still there are living things there. And it's just a creation of beauty that I look at. When I tell my children, I said, just stop and look around, look at the sand, look at the tiny rocks, look at the little tiny insects. I said, doesn't it make you feel that there is something so special about these things?
Making the choices for Duck Valley's future will not be easy. Tribal planner Lindsay Manning.
We had to adapt. We had to evolve to meet the changes, to meet the challenges. It was easier to cut with the iron blade than it was with the stone knife. And so we adapted from the stone knife to the iron blade. It was easier to cook in the metal pot than to boil it in the hot rocks in the hide. But we have to go outside of the lodge. We have to go outside of the teepee to make a living for our children and for ourselves. You can't just turn around and say ugh and walk back into our teepee and forget the world. We've got to adapt and change and evolve as we go along. Right now, the natural resource, the land itself, is only being utilized by a few, and those few are pretty well off. And the ones that don't realize the benefit from it, they wonder why they're not going anywhere. We have a finite number of acres that we could irrigate. We have a finite number of acres of land that produces hay. Those are already taken. They're all spoken for. So we got the new family and the new boy and the new girl getting married and having a family that want to live on the reservation but have to live in poverty to stay here.
As tribal administrator, Herman Atkins implements the decisions of the tribal council.
What's the difference between allowing mining on the reservation or tearing up 200 acres of land to raise crops and put fertilizer on it and make that land produce its maximum potential? And in some instances, using fertilizer that is detrimental to the soil and eventually turning the soil into something that it's not or it wasn't intended to be. What's the difference between mining and that? To me, the beginning of the destructive process that we're on now began with agriculture. When you take a piece of land and you alter it, and you make that piece of land produce more than it's naturally capable of producing, that additional production is going to create more food, and that more food is going to sustain more people, and more people are going to go and develop more land to produce more. That's the beginning of the course that we're on. And to me, the true environmentalists were the hunting and gathering societies. And only if everybody on the earth went back to that standard of living or subsistence can we say we're on earth for an indefinite period of time, as long as nature will allow us. But as long as we have control of it through technology, that's why I say we're on a destructive course that's irreversible.
Recently, the tribal members voted in referendum to explore mineral development on the reservation. Chairman Paiva speaks for the entire tribal council when he says any decision to commence on such activity will come only after thorough study and assurance of ecological safeguards, especially of the water resource, and guaranteed reclamation of the land. And if protection of reservation land and water cannot be assured, there will be no mining, he says.
We've got gold on this land. Our general account is almost null. And we have a chance of making a lot of money if we do our mining right. And we've hired expert mining people to come in and give us guidance on how to mine this gold and put some money into the general account. But the council is sitting back and they're saying, before we start negotiating with these big companies, and these big companies have offered us up to $150,000 to come in here to prospect, just to walk on the land to see what they can find on top. And they're willing to pay more to go underneath. But before we jump into that, we've got some experts that are going to do this study for us.
Corbin Harney is the spiritual leader of the Shoshone Paiute people. He says his spirituality is a gift from the Creator and has begun to speak out in various ways in defense of Mother Earth. He says he suffers with her.
I see we have to change. So the Indian people is the one, because they were put here as a caretaker of the Mother Earth. Our land is suffering, but I wish we can turn it around, all of us, not just the Indian people, everybody. And I think that Indian people can teach a lot of things because they are the one that's tied to the animals out there. They are the one that's tied to the birds and the Mother Earth. All the spirits out there is looking at the Indian. They can get their word from whatever, the wind, the trees, the water, and so forth. We have to look at that Indian. Even if you didn't like the Indian, you're still going to have to look at him because he's the only one that can communicate with what's out there. He's the one that can lead us the right direction because they've been here for 1,000 years before. They took care of everything. They didn't waste anything. So I think this is a reason why the spirits out there works with the Indian people. I think that we can teach. It's really important for us, I think, to work together.
Duck Valley is a microcosm of the world we live in. It is finite. It has finite resources. The leadership will make choices that will affect everyone. It's hard to say what the future will be for the Shoshone Paiute people, but it's clear that their cultural beliefs, shaped by the stories and the land, will guide them. We only got one planet out here. Just one. There ain't no other planet here besides this one. This is one planet we have to take care of. There's one air that we breathe. There's no other air. That's just this one. If we don't take care of this air, where are we going to get our fresh air or good air? Same with water. I talk about water. We only got one water. All that water on this Mother Earth come from the Mother Earth within the Mother Earth. Everything. All the food that we survive on today, that come from the Mother Earth. We come from the Mother Earth. If we don't take care of those things, where are we going to be moving to from here? Native American flute music, courtesy of Ken Light, and traditional singing and drumming by Joe Caskey.
Voices of the Wild Earth podcast are produced by me, Jane Fritz, and associate producer Justin Lantrip for the Idaho Mythweaver. This program is supported in part by a grant from the Idaho Humanities Council, a state-based program of the National Endowment for the Humanities. Additional funding is from the Bonner County Endowment Fund for Human Rights in the Idaho Community Foundation. We are especially grateful to the Idaho tribes for allowing us to share these original radio stories again as podcasts on mythweaver.org and Spotify and Apple Podcasts under Voices of the Wild Earth. Thank you for listening.